send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's exactly 9 o'clock, a very busy show tonight. My Mark Meets guest is boxing royalty. His dad, Chris Eubank, was a legend and he is a prize fighter himself. Chris Eubank Jr. is live at 10 o'clock. In The Big Question, has China already won its war with the West? I'll speak to the amazing Michael P. Senger, the US author of a new book on that very subject. In our news agenda with my amazing panel, why do we throw away so much food? Is it okay to disown your parents? And are you ready to start cruising again? Tonight, my panel are political commentator Sophie Corcoran, ex-Lib Dem MP Lembit Opik, and former Scottish Comedian of the Year Leo Kearse. And my big opinion monologue is coming. This crisis in Ukraine is one of the West's making. I'll see you after the headlines with Polly.
Mark, thank you. I'm Polly Middlehurst in the GB newsroom. Our top story, a second attempt to evacuate civilians from the city of Mariupol in Ukraine has failed as Russian strikes continue despite promises of a ceasefire. That's according to Ukraine's Interior Ministry. It follows the collapse of an agreed ceasefire yesterday in 2 areas of Ukraine. Mariupol's mayor, Vadim Bochenko, says as many as 200,000 people are now stuck in the southeastern city.
During the first days of the war, we counted the victims in tens. Today, we count them in hundreds, and in 2 days' time, we'll likely count them in thousands. They will not give us an opportunity to count the wounded and the killed, because the shelling has not stopped for the past 6 days.
The mayor of Mariupol speaking there. Well, Britain is to speed up its sanctions process tomorrow as new legislation will be pushed through Parliament. The government says it's going to update the Economic and Crime Bill. That's to allow the UK to implement harder and faster sanctions against those linked to President Putin and his regime. MPs are going to consider the amendments in the Commons tomorrow. Full coverage of that on GB News. Meanwhile, staff at a Ukrainian nuclear plant that was attacked earlier this week say it's now operating fully under the control of Russian forces. That's according to the International Atomic Energy Agency. Russian military at the Zaporizhzhia power plant have also cut off the internet and some mobile networks, complicating communications with the plant. The Ukrainian military are helping residents in the city of Irpin escape amid a Russian shelling. Those shocking scenes come after earlier where people were seen running as missiles hit the area, destroying their homes and buildings. President Putin says Moscow will halt its operation if his demands are met. And police in Russia have reportedly detained over 4,000 people following protests against President Putin's invasion of Ukraine. Anti-war protesters were beaten with batons and kicked by police as they were arrested in Russia. Footage also shows demonstrators, some of them elderly, being escorted onto buses by security forces. Here, the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, has said the UK is doing everything possible to speed up efforts to grant visas to Ukrainians fleeing the conflict. Over 1.5 million refugees have left Ukraine for neighbouring countries over the last 10 days. Priti Patel says the UK is offering support to those fleeing the conflict.
We are doing everything possible to surge applications and to help people fleeing Ukraine, fleeing the persecution that Putin is inflicting upon Ukraine, to come to our country. And we're working with the Ukrainian community, the Ukrainian diaspora community in the United Kingdom.
Priti Patel. And amid all the despair in Ukraine, a moment of joy in Kyiv today. 2 Ukrainian reservists donned their military uniforms and got married. Lesya and Valery, both members of Ukraine's Territorial Defence Unit, exchanged rings in front of fellow military members and their 18-year-old daughter. The couple said they had considered a wedding, but when war knocked on the door, they decided to finally tie the knot. On TV, online and on your radio through DAB+, you're with GB News. Now time to get back to Mark Dolan and Tonight.
My thanks to the brilliant Polly Middlehurst, who returns in an hour's time. It is Sunday the 6th of March, and you are watching Mark Dolan Tonight, and a cracking Sunday evening of entertainment we have lined up for you. My Mark Meets guest is boxing royalty. His dad, Chris Eubank, was of course a legend, and he is a prize fighter himself. Chris Eubank Jr. is live just after 10 o'clock. In the big question, has China already beaten the West and become the world's greatest superpower? I'll speak to Michael P. Senger, the author of a shocking new book on that very subject. The book is called Snake Oil: How Xi Jinping Shut Down the World. In our news agenda with my panel, why do we throw away so much food? Is it okay to disown your parents? And are you ready to start cruising again? Tonight, my panel are political commentator Sophie Corcoran, ex-Lib Dem MP and now broadcaster and commentator Lembit Opik, and former Scottish Comedian of the Year, the one and the only Mr. Leo Kearse. Plus, we've got my alternative news headlines. That's my satirical take on the day's big stories. Tonight, we feature Prince Andrew, Madonna and Kate Middleton. Plus, an honourable mention to the social media influencer Molly May Hague. That beard. Find out more at 10:03. We've also got another great British game show and so much more besides. It is Sunday night, so fire up the kettle, tear open the party rings, and let's get to work. The dreadful Vladimir Putin has given the arrogant, complacent West a right royal kick up the arse. As president of Russia, an economically insignificant country, Vlad the Mad, the monster behind the shocking carnage that we're seeing right now at the moment on the news wires as a result of the invasion of Ukraine, is leaving his blood-stained mark on the world. This pint-sized dictator's appalling decision to start a war with Ukraine has put our absurd 2-year overreaction to a seasonal respiratory virus into perspective. In fact, the horrific actions of old Vladimir have had the consequence of basically ending the pandemic by shifting focus. Have you heard a squeak about vaccines or case numbers or hospitalizations since he entered Ukraine? Absolutely not. Because for the last 2 years, the West didn't have anything better to do than bankrupt itself, junk its own values, and destroy its own societies for a nasty virus, yes, but one that largely threatens the very old and the ill, like a good number of other diseases, I think you'll find. We've had it too good in the West for too long. We are spoiled brats and are now paying the price. We've been fussing over which pronouns to use, obsessing over our history, which is largely glorious. We've been living on a diet of borrowed public money, and we've been spending precious resources appointing diversity officers and painting rainbow pedestrian crossings everywhere, the only consequence of which I can find is to confuse guide dogs for the blind. And we've walked blindly into this crisis. He started it, of course, but we in the West could and should have stopped him sooner. Vladimir Putin, President Xi of China, and the 2021 Slimmer of the Year, North Korea's Kim Jong-un, close to his target weight now, just needs to cut the carbs, well, they've all been tooling up and boosting their military power. And you can be sure that terror organizations like ISIS have done much the same. We've even given that hateful mob of gangsters, the Taliban, their own country, Afghanistan, and the huge arsenal of weapons, tanks, planes, helicopters, and ammunition that we left behind. And on the back of the billions that Germany, Italy, and others have been paying for Russian gas, old Vladimir has also been rearming and topping up his own nuclear arsenal, whilst we here in Britain have spent the last 2 years being paid to stay at home, getting even fatter on fast food, binge-watching Netflix, tweeting about how unfair the world is, trying to get people sacked for having an opinion or telling a joke, and announcing to anyone who cares that we are now he, him, she, her, or they, them. Well, we're buggered. That's what we actually are. China is the real story behind this, of course, and they can't wait to get their dirty mitts on Taiwan, and they won't stop there. As China marches on to become the world's predominant economic and military superpower, here in Britain we've been deleting problematic episodes of Fawlty Towers and sacking college professors for saying that men have testicles and women have a cervix. Well, here in the West, we've got no balls. As we've allowed our collective national debts to spiral, accelerated, of course, during the pandemic, we have, for decades now, underinvested in the military. We thought we were so clever. We thought we'd won the arguments. We thought we'd won the moral high ground. And we thought we'd won the war. In fact, we'd won nothing. And we now risk losing everything. Putin is an evil monster, but one of our own making. He is the monster we fed. For too long, we underestimated him and enriched him as a result of our own baffling green policies. Why drill for the coal, gas and shale beneath our very feet when we can buy it from dangerous dictators? Makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Putin has achieved a lot in the last 2 weeks, not least causing DFS to sell out of extra-large dining tables. You know what they say, big table, small ego. We'll have to get around that table very soon with this awful man, because I suspect that a negotiated settlement friendly to Russia is our only way out of this. Putin's rise has exposed all Western countries' economic, diplomatic, strategic and military arrogance, their short-sightedness and their incompetence. Our bizarre obsession with so-called safety over the last 2 years will feel like a sick joke when we confront the extraordinary peril of a global nuclear conflict, which could see all of us perish. That's what danger looks like. As Michael P. Senger, who's written a book about China and joins me later in the show, points out. In this tweet, he says the response to COVID has cost the United States over $16 trillion. That's over $50,000 per person. Do you feel like you got your $50,000 worth? Imagine that, $16 trillion. Just $500 billion invested in Russia, perhaps with favourable trading terms or even investment, could have prevented the horrors that we are now witnessing. The West rejected Russia's desire to enter NATO in the early 2000s at the start of Putin's reign, and we sent Russia running into the arms of China. That is the axis of evil times 100. Putin's appalling invasion of Ukraine changes everything, and the world will not be the same again. Boris is saved, by the way. He's been brilliant so far, engaging with world leaders, supporting Ukraine, and striking just the right tone. And that's it for the pandemic too. The fat lady has sung, and she's on her way home in a cab. I don't want to hear a syllable about case rates or variants ever again. You can either worry about a nasty flu virus or worry about a radioactive mushroom cloud, courtesy of Moscow, hanging over London, Birmingham, Cardiff, Belfast, Liverpool, Manchester or Edinburgh. Britain and the West need to man up, tool up and grow a pair. And we must come together as one nation, Great Britain, irrespective of race, colour, creed or religion. Our diversity in Britain is our strength, not our weakness. As long as cranks on social media and in our institutions flogging dodgy ideology don't divide us in the way that they want to. Ukrainians have taught us an important lesson, that it's a strong sense of patriotism, nationhood and unity which are the ultimate weapon against an assault from the likes of Putin. He underestimated the good people of Ukraine who have come together and now fight for their country. I interviewed a woman in Kiev this week who spoke to me from a cupboard and who had a Kalashnikov rifle by her side. So what is the plan of action for the West to see off this existential threat? Our economy must be a total priority for the foreseeable future, because as well as schools, hospitals and the police, it's the economy that will pay for the colossal military investment that we now need. That means a massive army, navy and air force. And it means sophisticated nuclear weapons, tanks, helicopters and planes. That's what staying safe looks like. Not wearing a rag on your mush, having a squirt of hand sanitizer as you go to Morrison's, or following a one-way system of arrows in boots. We have to have energy independence as well. Net zero is gone. It's over. Another thing that Putin has unwittingly put the kibosh on. I want us to go green, and we will. But right now we are at war, even if many haven't realised it yet. We've got 500 years worth of coal beneath our feet. Let's get digging. We've got at least 2 decades of North Sea oil. Drill, baby, drill. And rather than concrete up shale gas sites, let's go fracking crazy. The West can win, folks, but only if we man up and wake up too. That's my view. What's yours? Mark at gbnews.uk. I would love to hear from you. Please get your thoughts over, especially if you disagree. With me now and joining me throughout the show is my all-star panel. Lembit Opik, former Lib Dem MP, broadcaster and commentator now. Sophie Corcoran, political broadcaster, and comedian Leo Kearse. Great to have all three of you with me. Lembit, have we brought this crisis on ourselves?
Yes, we have. And I agree with some of what you say, but not everything, Mark. If you actually look at the history of the Ukraine situation, it's far more nuanced than I think people make out. There's a great film called Ukraine on Fire by Oliver Stone. It was made in 2016, quite prophetically, and it points out that the West hasn't exactly been blameless, and we could see this coming. The short version of this is that for about 8 years we've been fighting a proxy war against Russia, which may not be a popular thing to say here in the UK, but if you look at Donetsk and Luhansk, which are two of the very contested areas, we have actually been putting people who really have rather unsavoury views and quite anti-Russian views in positions of power from the West. Now, this is like a 90-minute conversation, so I reduce it to 20 seconds. In essence, we need to see where this came from. And perhaps I wouldn't agree with the level of bullishness that people are saying that we have to militarise. We need to actually understand the cause in the first place. Why do I think all this? Well, I grew up in Northern Ireland. And once again, it was all the terrorists were bad, the British government's good. In the end, a negotiated settlement has saved lives. And that could save us from war now.
Well, it's interesting that you've made those set of points, Lembit. Sophie, what's your view on this? Am I giving Putin too much of an easy ride? This is, of course, the man who has invaded Ukraine.
Well, no, ultimately, the reason why Ukraine got invaded was because Putin invaded. We can't blame the West for Putin invading because that was a decision he himself made. However, the reason why it's been able to escalate to this stage is largely because of the West's incompetence. I mean, the net zero thing is a massive part of that because a lot of Europe's reliance on gas obviously comes from Russia. Therefore, they've been able to manipulate Europe into sort of shutting up and, not giving enough resistance to Putin because of this stupid green obsession. I mean, I would rather climate change than World War III, but this is kind of where we're at right now. And we've just got to get over it, to be honest, because we're giving that man far too much control to manipulate nations because of his gas. I mean, we saw it with Germany and why they were so reluctant to cut them off of the SWIFT banking system. The reason why is because Russia would simply just turn off the gas. And that, to be honest, Russia is military powerful, but it's not their weapons and it's not their soldiers that are giving Russia the amount of power they have. It is their gas. And that's the reason why they're able to do what they've got to do.
Yeah, Leo, is Putin a monster of the West's making?
Yeah, I mean, I think the West does bear some responsibility because the West is vastly superior and everybody wants to be in the West. This is what the problem is. In the Ukraine, they've had civil uprisings. They've had votes. Like Zelensky got 75% of the vote. Most people in Ukraine want to be allied with Europe, allied with the West, and have liberal Western values and democracy. And it's ridiculous to say that there's nuance in this situation. What nuance can there be when you've got this military dictator going in and massacring civilians? There's no nuance there whatsoever. Okay. It's absolutely not nuanced. You mentioned Donetsk, Luhansk. Those are areas of Ukraine that have been infiltrated by Russian militia. By Russian militia to destabilize Ukraine. It's absolutely disgusting. Any involvement that the West has in Ukraine, and I admit the West has done terrible things in other countries in the past. We've seen Afghanistan, we've seen Iraq, we've seen terrible things done. But in Ukraine, the West has only done what the people in Ukraine want. They want to be part of the West, and we should support them in that, and we should help them expel these Russian intruders. And as for Russian military strength, what military strength? This is like if France and Germany and the UK decided to invade Wales and couldn't do it in a weekend. It's an absolute joke. There's a 65-kilometre convoy of Russian tanks and trucks and supply units absolutely just in a logjam because they haven't planned. They can't actually do this because the failings of a centrally controlled economy and a centrally controlled political system is that people do things out of fear instead of out of desire and out of being able to do it and provide a good service. So we're seeing the absolute failure of Putin, and he's got a Potemkin army. It looks good in the parades, but when it comes to the crunch, he can't even take Ukraine. This has absolutely embarrassed him. If I was China, I would be looking to annex Russia right now. Before this crisis, it had an economy the size of Spain's. Right now, it's got an economy the size of a Tesco Extra. Just march in there. If I was Xi Jinping, I'd march in there and I'd take it. You wouldn't even need an army. Just a taxi with some, goons in it. Just, man, the absolute joke. Okay. Russia has embarrassed
I'll have
itself.
to correct you. I think they've got the economy the size of a Tesco Express. It's actually worse than the picture you paint. Lembit?
Okay, this is why we're not making much progress, because if you choose to ignore what's actually been going on, Leo, for the last 8 years, you choose to ignore the provocations that, whether you like it or not, are there in black and white. Now, I don't think that Oliver Stone is a patsy.
The conspiracy theorist Oliver Stone.
So hold on a second. I don't think Oliver Stone is a patsy for Putin. I'm sure from what you said, you haven't actually seen.
I think he and you are patsies for Putin.
Okay, fine. Let me try and finish the point, please. I don't think that Oliver Stone made that video to be popular with people like you. I do know a lot of Russian people, and it's surprising how many of them have some sympathy for the situation. Now, you may not like that, Leo, but when it comes down to it, there is nuance here. We made promises about not trying to get Ukraine into NATO. We seem to be breaking those promises. Putin has said...
Promises?
Clearly,
Putin, a week ago, 10 days ago, Putin was promising he wasn't going to invade Ukraine. He promised he'd turn the troops round, and they were departing. So when we talk about promises, I mean, come on. Like, when has NATO ever attacked? When have we ever attacked Russia? Well, tell me, when have we ever attacked Russia? When has Europe ever attacked Russia?
We've been fighting proxy wars all over the world, Leo, and I think Mark...
Just as well, we need to spread Western liberal democracy.
The point. Okay, let's force liberal democracy on people.
We're not forcing it. The people in Ukraine voted for it. The people in Ukraine want it.
Okay, Leo, tell me about the dispute about the second language in some of those regions. You obviously know all about this. Tell me what happened in that dispute. You don't know, do you?
Oh, why don't you tell me? Why don't you tell me? Why don't you tell me Vladimir Putin's inside leg measurement? You know what I mean? What is the second language got to do with anything?
You've actually just made my point for me. You don't even know the dispute that's taken place in parts of Ukraine about making Russia.
So you'd go in and massacre people over a second language?
Okay.
Are you the Scottish National Party?
Okay, Leo. Let me just tell you something. A significant proportion of my family was exterminated by the Soviet Union. Now, you can talk over me if you want, but I've got no reason to love Russia. I've got no reason to talk up Russia. I'm sitting here saying this because I've actually bothered to do my research here. And there is a nuance here. And Leo, you can keep interrupting me and telling me that I'm a patsy for Putin. I don't like what's going on, but I do not like it whenever people like yourself pretend you understand the situation like it's black and white when it's not.
Well, Lembit, help us with the grey area. What is the grey area? Because from the point of view of Leo and perhaps many people watching this programme, a dictator, an awful dictator, has illegally entered a sovereign, independent European country.
Yeah. 3 things to say. First of all, the West has to be very careful before it preaches about illegal wars. Secondly, there is this disputed behaviour towards Russian citizens in Ukraine, where many of them feel discriminated against, and they do look to Russia for support. Thirdly, we have broken conditions that we agreed with Russia about Ukraine. We've broken the rules. And then
what conditions?
There's, well, for example, not trying to encourage Ukraine to go into NATO, because Putin's concern is...
When did Ukraine join NATO?
Once the Ukraine...
When did Ukraine join NATO? When were there any concrete steps? There was talk like a decade ago.
Okay.
But when were there concrete steps?
Mark, I'd like to answer your question.
Lembit,
I'd like to answer your question. It's quite clear that there are overtures to try to get the Ukraine to enter NATO. You've just said so yourself.
Why would Ukraine need to enter NATO? I mean, it's not like Russia's going to invade it.
The bottom line here is... Putin,
I mean, maybe we should have rushed that application through. So it would have seemed like the sensible thing to do.
That would be Putin's concern, because Putin believes that once you're in NATO, you have to do what the United States says.
Putin's concern right now is having his ear tickled with an ice pick. Putin has completely embarrassed himself on the world stage. All his generals and all his cronies are having their money taken away from them. They're culpable in war crimes now, and they're going to look to depose him to protect themselves.
I'm not going to raise my voice to answer your question or your comment there, Leo, but I'm going to finish my point.
Yeah.
This is the problem. Leo, you're shrill, talking over me. Your attempt to try to defeat my argument by making polemical statements doesn't get us anywhere. It actually makes the world closer to the midnight nuclear holocaust that none of us want. What I'm suggesting is it might just be good if we learn from the lessons of history here. Let me stress again, I have absolutely no reason to defend the former Soviet Union, which caused me to be born in the United Kingdom.
Okay,
I've got one thing. Being worried about being better dead than red.
I've got one thing.
I grew up, Leo. And now what I'm saying to you is, it doesn't help for you to keep interrupting, because you are being an allegory for what the West is doing.
Look,
I've got one thing.
Where a very large
I've got one thing to say.
One
tiny thing to say.
What Putin's doing.
If you'll finish speaking about how much you love Vladimir Putin, how did appeasement of Hitler work out?
OK, you know what? That's a pretty amazing thing you just said, Leo, because you're not really listening to anything I'm saying. What I'm saying to you is, whether you like Putin or you dislike Putin, it's the politics of total foolishness to not ask yourself the question why so many Russians are actually sympathetic to Putin.
None of the Russians I know are sympathetic to him at all. They feel themselves part of Europe. They feel themselves part of the West. They want to be part of the West.
Now,
they want a democratic Russia.
Let me go to the fact here. Here's a fact for you, Leo. You clearly don't know the history that I've been discussing, and why should you? I mean, this has been a recent thing. I've applied myself to it because I actually employ a Russian.
Well, look, I'm all for a nuanced...
We should start with history rather than starting at shouting at each other, and maybe that's what we should do in the course of the next few months to de-escalate the situation.
Lembit, I'm all for a nuanced look at this complex problem, and clearly Putin is the aggressor, and you're no Putin cheerleader, and I'm sure that Leo says that in jest to a degree, although it underpins a point he's making about your sympathies to the Russian side. Very, very briefly, we've only got a couple of seconds, but Lembit, we can discuss till the cows come home why it's happened. How do we fix it, Lembit?
We talk, we negotiate. We don't scream at Putin the way that maybe...
And what does a settlement look like, Lembit, do you think?
I would say that we're going to have to start with a ceasefire. Secondly, we have to listen.
We're not shooting at him. How do we have a ceasefire when we're not shooting at him?
Sophie, how does this play out? How do we fix it? Do we let Russia keep Crimea? Do Ukraine promise never to join NATO? What's the answer?
Ultimately, I think there is only one way how all of this is going to end, and that is that Putin is going to end up dead somehow. either somebody internally or somebody externally will take him out. And I think the Russians will end up taking him out because of the damage. He's cutting the entire country off from the world, and someone is, you know,
Sophie,
he's going to
Sophie is like Christine Hamilton, who told me on this programme she wants the assassination of Putin. And my good friend Len Bidopik wants jaw, not war, around a massive table. How about you, Leo? How do we fix this?
We get rid of Putin. If we have to create some sort of golden bridge for him to walk over and retire, that's what happens. But I mean, we need to crush Putin economically, militarily, and support the Ukrainian people to live their democratic desires. They want to be part of the West. Let's help them live that dream. And also, we should be wary of people in this country who are in the pocket of Putin, because there are more than a few of them.
Well, what do you think? Mark at gbnews.uk. Who's to blame for this crisis? Carl is currently editing the Big Opinion monologue. It will be on Twitter very shortly at GB News. Coming up later in the show at 10 o'clock, my Mark Meets guest is Chris Eubank Jr, an incredible boxer, just like his dad. In fact, he might even be better, and he'll tell us his story just after 10. We've got my alternative news headlines. In the news agenda, is it okay to disown your parents? Why do we throw away so much food? Plus another great British game show. But after this, have China already beaten the West? We'll speak to a top US author who suggests that may be the case. See you shortly.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Well, lots of emails coming in relation to our discussion about Vladimir Putin and the West. Steve says, Dear Mark, get rid of Putin. How did that work out when we got rid of Saddam Hussein? Not too well, if I remember. However, Alex says the following. Dear Mark, I agree with Leo, your panellist. Ukrainian refugees are fleeing westwards, not east. Andrew says, Mark, a very lively debate to say the least. I have mixed emotions about all the remarks. The one thing not mentioned was the fact that the West promised to defend Ukraine once they rid themselves of nuclear weapons. How about this from Avril, who says, Mark, your monologue was 50% right. However, with regards to Russia, Lembit is spot on. You haven't done your history like that Scottish chap who likes the sound of his own voice. And to be quite honest, the West are to blame for this, and I'm ashamed. Well, look, thank you so much, Avril, for that. It is all about opinions. I'll get to more of yours very shortly, but it's time now for the big question, in which we tackle a major news story of the day. And tonight, let's take a look at China's role in the pandemic and, frankly, the Ukraine crisis as well. Let's speak to the author of a best-selling new book all about the Chinese Communist Party and its actions over the last 2 years. Michael P. Senger is the author of Snake Oil, How Xi Jinping Shut Down the World, and he joins me now. Great to have you on the show, Michael.
Thank you, Mark. Great to be here.
What are the headlines of your book?
So over the last 2 years, I've been researching and writing and mostly tweeting about the influence of the Chinese Communist Party on the response to COVID-19. And the results of that research over 2 years became the basis for my book, Snake Oil, How Xi Jinping Shut Down the World. And what my research reveals, what also ultimately comes out, is that the entire response to COVID-19 around the world was really one giant influence operation from the very beginning, with what we saw in early 2020 with those fear videos that came out of Wuhan, moving into all the propaganda that we started to hear around March 2020 with 2 weeks to slow the spread, follow the science, just stay home, those lockdowns in which the entire world suddenly copied what China claimed they had done in Wuhan to supposedly eliminate this virus in Wuhan. You have this domino effect where one country after another goes into lockdown, and everything after that was simply imported from what China said they had done in Wuhan. You find China's paw prints on every single aspect of the response to COVID-19 going all the way back to early 2020.
Yes, and of course, the West pretty much discarded their own values in terms of how to govern a society, locking people down, inflicting a huge privation on their civil liberties and damaging the economy.
That's absolutely right. Absolutely horrifying. Now, if you think back to what we were experiencing in those dark days of early 2020, and especially in March 2020, if you're like me, I was not especially afraid of COVID-19 at that time. I've always been a big statistics person, and the early data actually coming out about the coronavirus at that time was not especially alarming, especially for people who were, not elderly, who were fairly healthy. But suddenly that didn't seem to matter. Suddenly, within a matter of just a couple of weeks, we were told that, all of our rights were suspended. I woke up one day and suddenly all of my rights were gone. Just like that. What we knew about the virus didn't seem to matter. Not only did our knowledge about the virus not matter, but whoever had implemented this policy to suddenly shut down one country after another, across the entire world, had given absolutely no thought to what this meant for business owners, to what this meant for the poor, not only in the rich world. I don't think anybody will ever forget those scenes we saw of miles-long lines at food banks in the United States. In the United Kingdom, they say that 5% of the population of the United Kingdom, one of the wealthiest countries in the world, went hungry during strict lockdown. And then even worse, you saw what happened in the developing world. Suddenly, you have countries like India and South Africa locking down as well. You had this exodus of people just thrown out of work, forced to march to villages, just walk to villages thousands of miles away. They had absolutely no savings. Essentially, millions and millions of people were sentenced to starve, and many would perish, supposedly to protect from the super virus. Of course, we now know that those lockdowns did absolutely nothing to protect from this virus, and the virus is never that dangerous to begin with. But, those people cannot have their lives back. Millions were cast into extraordinary poverty, and whoever implemented this policy seemed to give no thought to that. And in fact, when you go back and you look at the pandemic plans, every single wealthy country around the world, the United States, the UK, each country in Europe has its own pandemic plan. And lockdown is not in those pandemic plans, nor is it in the World Health Organization's pandemic plans. Not only is it not in them, but if they do discuss it at all, they say absolutely do not do this. It is systematically excluded from those pandemic plans. There's no history of this policy of lockdown within the entire Western world since the Middle Ages at the very latest. It was all based on what Xi Jinping said he did in Wuhan in early 2020.
So do you think that this idea that the Chinese locked down to slow the spread of the virus was a lie? Was it a myth? Was it propaganda at the beginning of the pandemic?
That's all it was. Yeah, lockdown. The entire concept of lockdown is pure propaganda. Has no history in science. has no discussion within Western pandemic plans and Western epidemiology. It was simply one giant propaganda operation. And what we saw is that as soon as Wuhan locked down, on the very day that Xi Jinping announces this lockdown and throws, shuts millions of people in Wuhan into their homes, we start seeing all these propaganda videos, all these fear videos released all over the world, in the UK, the United States, websites, all of which are blocked in China. China is blocked off from the rest of the world's internet. But suddenly we see these videos going super viral, just all over social media sites, Facebook, Twitter. Facebook usually is happy, fun-loving place. Suddenly we're seeing all these videos, people just falling to their deaths, just piles of bodies in Wuhan, China, and everybody, having seizures, and just this the idea that this super virus is coming to get you. Now, of course, a couple months later, every single one of these videos is proven to be fake. So all these faked videos set the stage for how the entire world perceived this virus that was supposedly coming.
So,
and shortly
Michael,
after that,
are you suggesting that the Chinese Communist Party created the illusion that they were locking down in Wuhan in order to get the West to lock down? And if so, what was their motive?
The lockdown was real to a degree, but the motive really is exactly, as it's discussed in my book. It's about shutting down the world. It was about laundering this concept of lockdown into science, and to see how effective that was. By shutting down this one medium-sized city within China, of Wuhan, they got the entire world to follow them to lockdown. Shortly after that lockdown, the World Health Organization says, the Chinese Communist Party says that this had decreased their infection curve. And based on that alone, based on absolutely no precedent within science or epidemiology, based solely on what the Chinese Communist Party said, the World Health Organization, their representative to China tells the rest of the world in a press conference, you have to do this. What China has shown the world is that you have to do this. Copy China's response to COVID-19. They deny it now, but they said that in completely uncertain terms. And that's how this policy of lockdown was laundered into science all over the world, based solely on that and what the Chinese Communist Party had said. One country after another imports this policy in the hope that this will supposedly eliminate the virus. Of course, we now know that was complete nonsense.
Was this ultimately, in your view, a scorched earth policy by the Chinese Communist Party on the rest of the world?
There's no question that the Chinese Communist Party profited from this in a number of ways. Chinese billionaires made a ton of money by selling PPE and testing equipment to the rest of the world. So it's a short-term profit. Also, certainly in crippling the rest of the world, crippling the free economy of the free world. The GDP of every G20 country outside of China fell dramatically in 2020. Just a huge, impact on the rest of the world's economy. However, China actually grew. China was not really very impacted by this. The other goal here was more long-term. Lockdown is a very totalitarian policy. This idea that you can just have this blanket suspension of people's rights, telling them just stay home, when that actually means, you lose your job, you lose your business, you have no more rights suddenly. That is a very totalitarian policy. And there's using this shock, using this fear in early 2020, that was a very quick way to implement, export that totalitarian policy around the world. And we're still living with that degree of totalitarianism today. The other thing this did is that lockdown, because there was so much buy-in to this lockdown policy among the elite class, among the political class, that implanted this seed, this idea of a super virus that we're still living with today. This idea that there's this super virus that you can only defeat through Chinese totalitarianism. The idea that the Chinese were able to eliminate this. And some people still stick by that big lie today, the idea that just by shutting down Wuhan for a few weeks, that China, with their super lockdown, where they welded people in, that was the secret, that their lockdown was so strict that they were able to eliminate this virus because they welded people into their homes. And of course, they had all these other strict policies and these quarantine camps and everything. And it turns out that every single policy, not just those initial lockdowns, but every policy that came after that, from mass testing to masks to vaccine passes, obviously, all of those policies are simply imported from what China says they did in Wuhan. That when you look at the pandemic plans that countries developed after those initial months of 2020, all these policies come straight from China. The idea of this, oh, okay, this works so well in China that we're going to do it here. None of these policies have any real history in science. They're all just imported from what China claims it did in Wuhan, using their influence, using their propaganda and influence within scientific and elite institutions.
Michael, I'd love to bring our panel in. Are you able to stay with us over the break? Because this is an important and fascinating conversation.
Absolutely, I'd love to.
Michael P. Senger is the author of Snake Oil, How Xi Jinping Shut Down the World. We'll continue this conversation. A big reaction coming in on email, and I'm going to bring the panel in because I know they've got strong views on this. Has China already won the West? Hi, Mark. No, they haven't won yet, but they are winning courtesy of the West's decision to manufacture everything there, from amplifier knobs to my granny's bloomers. We need to bring back manufacturing to the UK and the US. Trevor, thank you for that. And I'm sure your granny's bloomers are most flattering. How about this from Andrew? Hi, Mark. It's outrageous to suggest that scientists and world leaders could all be so stupid as to lock down based on Chinese propaganda. What we saw in Italy, Spain and India was no lie. And this author's opinion are an affront to those who died. That's Andrew. Well, look, I'll put that point to Michael after the break. Lembit wants to speak on that as well, and Sophie and Leo. So we'll get to that. Don't forget, after 10, we have Eubank Jr. live on the show, and my alternative news headlines, and a great British game show, plus our news agenda. Why do we waste so much food? And are you ready to go cruising again? Lots to get through. I'll see you after this.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
So many emails coming in relation to our conversation about the origins of the Ukraine invasion. This was a debate particularly sparked off by Lembit and Leo in our news agenda earlier in the show. Let's have a look at this from Aid, who says, "Dear Mark, Leo has completely lost it. He's lost the argument and has simply resorted to mocking Lembit and bullying him. I thought GB News was the home of free speech." Well, look, an interesting response there from Aid. It is all about opinions, and I'll get to my panel's opinions shortly. Let me reintroduce my big question guest. Michael P. Senger is the author of Snake Oil, How Xi Jinping Shut Down the World. And we're asking in our big question whether China has already won the West. Michael P. Senger, has China already won? Is it game over for the West?
Thank you so much, Mark. No, I don't think this is game over. I don't think the Chinese Communist Party understood the amount of resistance they would get to all this. I really think it was this idea of shutting down the world. You know, shutting down the world is no small feat. So, I mean, the fact that they were able to pull that off is pretty, you know, darkly incredible. However, you know, what we've seen is that in countries across the world, that especially just in the last few weeks, that these COVID mandates have really been rolled back, that this idea suddenly evaporated. That, you know, countries are starting to lift their vaccine passes. You know, in the United Kingdom, lifted virtually all of its COVID mandates very recently. And that's really, you know, thanks in no small part to the resistance that we've seen, the civic resistance, both online and in protests in the real world and just in the mainstream discourse, that people have really decided, you know, wait a minute, these things don't work. Each of these policies, from the lockdowns to the mass testing, the vaccine passes, the masks, they are completely ineffective in slowing the spread of respiratory virus. What do? They seed the idea that there is this pandemic out there. They are made to be self-perpetuating. But fortunately, enough of the public caught on to this scam, and it has really been rolled back. And, you know, fingers crossed, hopefully it does not really come back in a big way.
Michael Lembit-Opik is a former British MP in the House of Commons. Lembit, what's your view?
Well, I should also declare an interest. It'll interest Leo to know I was the deputy chair of the all-party China group when I was in Parliament, and I spent time there. And before that, I worked for Procter & Gamble briefly in Guangzhou.
Did you take Chinese money as well as Russian rubles?
Yes, Beijing Barry.
I will take your
Mark
comment.
said it, not me.
Lembit, no wonder you retired at the age of 50.
No, I was retired at the age of 45 by my constituents, but that's another story. Michael, I agree with you in one sense, and interested to know what you think about this. China's playing a great strategic game, it seems to me. They've bought up half of Africa, and they make a lot of what we buy here. But surely, Michael, it's not China that's doing it to us, it's us doing it to ourselves. We've exported our manufacturing and all of our pollution as well, or all of that pollution. Then we blame China for having pollution.
Correct.
We have a very confused attitude towards China where we condemn them, but then we're totally dependent on them for much of what we make. And in terms of the lockdown, Michael, surely we did it to ourselves, because China didn't tell us to lock down. We just made those guesswork judgments for ourselves. So is it not possible to argue that China saw the opportunity and they presented us with the chance to trip up, but we did the falling for ourselves?
Well, I think that's, you know, that's an excellent point. And yeah, I mean, that's definitely an excellent question. But I think it boils down to what the Chinese Communist Party actually is, especially in the modern world. Yeah, in a lot of ways, the West did do this to itself. There's a huge groupthink aspect to this. But that's because of the influence that China has been able to build up over the past several decades. This story does not begin just in 2020. It goes all the way back to when Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger reopened the West to China back in the 1970s. And ever since then, China has very gradually, the Chinese Communist Party has very gradually been building up its influence, especially within elite institutions across the Western world. And just using that influence, and this is how communist influence has always worked historically, going all the way back to Stalin's regime and the way that they dominated Eastern Europe, going all the way back to the history of the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese Civil War. The Chinese Communist Party rules by conspiracy. It only takes a very small, tiny number of very evil people embedded within elite institutions and their mastery of propaganda, which is what they used to gain power and take control of China, even going all the way back there. And we've allowed them, we let them in the door ourselves.
Could I just ask one very short additional question? You used the word evil there. I never felt that the Chinese were lying to me or trying to deceive me when I was in Guangzhou or indeed in Hong Kong. They told us what they were going to do, and they're doing it. So surely they're just wanting what we have in terms of influence and standard of living, and you can't really blame them for taking the opportunity we've given them.
The Chinese Communist Party is evil. You know, their history of human rights abuses and genocide and oppression is just, you know, absolutely unbelievable. The number of lives that have been destroyed by the Chinese Communist Party, it's really immeasurable. We have no grasp of it within the free world, thankfully, within the Western world. And it was definitely our mistake in many ways to let that into our own system, because our systems have become so intertwined. Our elite institutions have become so intertwined. Our universities, think tanks, corporations have slowly become entangled with the Chinese Communist Party. And this machine, we have let it in. And we really saw that kicked into overdrive in 2020, because what happened with Xi Jinping is before that, you had China's moderate leaders who this influence network was expanding. It was very, very gradually, not noticeably. But in 2020, Xi Jinping, being the brutal dictator that he is, kicks us into overdrive. And with lockdowns, we saw communist influence across the world kicked into its highest gear. That this policy was very quickly laundered into policy. And using propaganda, they essentially steamroll Western leaders into embracing this policy of lockdown. And once they did that, they couldn't go back, because they had attached their entire ego to this idea of the super virus, that once you had, destroyed the entire economy in the hopes of slowing the spread, it's very, very difficult for people to admit that they had made such an egregious mistake with the lives of others.
Michael,
and not only that, but there's a massive groupthink aspect to it.
Yeah, Michael, we could obviously talk to you for hours. The clock's against us. Briefly, if you can, I've had a couple of emails saying, look, they hear what you're saying about what China were doing when they sort of, in your view, confected this drama around the virus. But one email in particular, Andrew said, look, how many Western medics and scientists could be that stupid to roll out a policy that they knew to be wrong? So how do we answer that? Why did the West go for this? Some of the greatest scientific minds in the world.
These are absolutely excellent questions. And the answer is that this is how the Chinese Communist Party has always worked. Going back, they have a century of experience with this. I encourage those. That's actually the most fascinating part of the story, most darkly fascinating part of the story, is the conduits of this propaganda operation, the linguistic elements to it, and how they use modern technology to get intelligent people to buy into this absurdity, because that's what the Chinese Communist Party does. It convinces intelligent people of absurdities. And seeing elites around the world, elites, I think, tend to be a bit egotistical. And they think that they're immune to propaganda. Propaganda is for little people. But when they see everyone around them embracing this lie that the Chinese Communist Party eliminated this virus with their super lockdown by welding people in.
But briefly, Michael, what about the scenes? What about the scenes in northern Italy, in India, in Spain, as pointed out by my viewer Andrew? They weren't fake, were they?
Now, some of that might just be the media, this is the big story, we're going to sow this fear because that's what's selling. But some of that could have been deliberate as well. That Italy was the first country in Europe to buy into the Belt and Road Initiative. You had a massive propaganda operation coming from China, focused very heavily on Italy, centered very heavily on Italy within those first couple months. The political party that was in charge of Italy at that time was very China-friendly political party. Frankly, a lot of what we saw coming out of Italy at that time was propaganda.
Okay, well, very interesting. Michael, sorry to interrupt, but the clock is against us. Sophie, an interesting point there from Michael P. Senger. The propagandists in China essentially tricked the West, and therefore our own scientists and top medics basically visited that propaganda onto us, like a domino effect, Sophie.
Both of you are actually right in what you're saying, because there is no doubt that China have already defeated the West. They did it a long time ago. They're embedded into our universities, into our parliament, courtesy of Beijing Barry. But also, Lembit is right that the reason why they've been able to do that is because the West ourselves have been so deeply incompetent. I mean, China unleashed this virus onto the world. And this virus is China's fault. There is no question about that. So why on earth did we then go and copy their style of lockdown? Why did we then go and spend millions buying Chinese masks, Chinese LFTs? What we effectively did was we propped up their economy while our own economy shattered.
What a brilliant...
Therefore, the goal, the difference, the gap between the nations
Amazing.
has
Brilliant summing up. Michael P. Senger is the author of Snake Oil, How Xi Jinping Shut Down the World. See you in 2.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
That you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Has China already defeated the West? A big email response coming in. This from Avril, who says, "Hi Mark, hallelujah to your guest Michael P. Senger. Thank God, some real common sense and knowledge." There you go, very positive response there. Mark, in regard to Ukraine, says, "Your guest Lembit is right in all areas regarding the West, as our leaders are useless. I understand the frustrations of the other two guests and feel the same. But when can we all agree that Russia and China are rotten to the core, and it's all causing us to fall out over it and blame our own leaders?" Well, look, thank you so much for that, Mark. We'll get to more of your emails shortly. After this, our alternative news headlines and Chris Eubank Jr. live at 10:05. Lots to get through. Plus our news agenda. Why do we throw away so much food? And are you ready to go cruising again? Plus another great British game show. But first, the headlines with Polly.
Your latest news headlines this evening. A second attempt to evacuate civilians from the city of Mariupol in southern Ukraine has failed despite promises of a ceasefire. That's according to Ukraine's Interior Ministry. And it follows the collapse of an agreed ceasefire yesterday in two areas of the country. Mariupol's mayor, Vadim Boychenko, says 200,000 people are now stuck in the southeastern city.
During the first days of the war, we counted the victims in tens. Today, we count them in hundreds, and in 2 days' time, we'll likely count them in thousands. They will not give us an opportunity to count the wounded and the killed, because the shelling has not stopped for the past 6 days.
The mayor of Mariupol speaking there. Well, Britain is to speed up its sanctions process tomorrow as new legislation will be pushed through Parliament. The government says updates to the economic crime bill will allow the UK to implement harder and faster sanctions across those linked to President Putin and his regime. MPs will be considering the amendments in the Commons tomorrow. Priti Patel says the UK is doing everything possible to speed up efforts to grant visas to Ukrainians fleeing the conflict. Over 1.5 million refugees have now left for neighbouring countries over the last 10 days. The Home Secretary says the UK is offering all its support.
We are doing everything possible to surge applications and to help people fleeing Ukraine, fleeing the persecution that Putin is inflicting upon Ukraine, to come to our country. And we're working with the Ukrainian community, the Ukrainian diaspora community in the United Kingdom.
Priti Patel. Well, the Ukrainian military are helping residents in the city of Irpin try to escape now. But it's a treacherous journey. People were seen running as missiles destroyed homes and buildings. President Putin says Moscow will halt its operation if his demands are met. The UN has confirmed the civilian death toll stands at 364, including more than 20 children. Police in Russia have reportedly detained over 4,000 people following protest against Putin and the invasion of Ukraine. Anti-war protesters were beaten with batons and kicked by police as they were arrested across 21 cities in Russia. Footage also shows demonstrators, some elderly, being escorted onto buses by the security forces. And among the despair, a moment of joy in Kyiv today. 2 Ukrainian reservists donned their military uniforms and got married. Lisha and Valery, both members of Ukraine's territorial defence unit, managed to exchange rings, all in front of their fellow military members and their 18-year-old daughter. The couple said they'd always thought about wedding, getting married, but when war knocked on the door, they decided to tie the knot. Congratulations to them. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+, you're with GB News. Now time for Mark Dolan and Tonight.
In just 3 minutes' time, the incredible boxer Chris Eubank Jr. Can't wait for that. Get your questions in now, mark@gbnews.uk. It's time now for my alternative news headlines, and we kick off with the wonderful news that Brooklyn Beckham is to sell his $11 million starter home with his beautiful fiancée, Nicola Peltz. Imagine your first home being worth $11 million. It just goes to show what happens when you work hard, save your money, and spend 9 months in a Spice Girl. Last night, we gave you the distressing news that the social media influencer Molly May Haig is suffering unwanted facial hair as a result of a new treatment called dermaplaning. She's told the press that she's basically growing a beard. What a shocking story. Well, here at Mark Dolan Tonight, we have exclusive before and after photos. Here she is beforehand, a very fine-looking woman, I think you'll agree. What a lovely face. And here she is after. Crumbs. Whoever gave her that treatment was no wizard. Tony Blair has hit the headlines this week, admitting that he may have been wrong over the Iraq war. Speaking to the Archbishop of Canterbury in a Radio 4 interview, he cast doubt on the wisdom of that decision. It's thought the former Prime Minister is considering apologising for all of the mistakes he made whilst in power. But alas, it's feared he hasn't got 50 years left in which to do it. Madonna has appeared in public without her Instagram filter, as reported in today's Mail newspaper. The 63-year-old pop superstar shows off an impressively smooth complexion. She looks fantastic, but her hands, as you can see, tell a different story. Back to that Molly May story now. That beard, what a nightmare. Here's the before photo. What a charismatic young woman. Excellent eyebrows. A good set of ears as well. Nice teeth. Here's the after photo. Crumbs. Jez we can. Meanwhile, pop superstar James Blunt attended the Blenheim Ball in aid of the Starlight Children's Foundation this week. The generous pop superstar personally raised several £1,000s that night, with rich guests bidding in an auction not to attend one of his concerts. Meanwhile, staying on music, Sharon and Ozzy Osbourne are leaving Los Angeles and they're moving back to Britain to save tax. Sharon's delighted about the move and Ozzy is said to be buzzing. When is he ever not? Boris Johnson has outlined his 6-point plan for the next few months of his leadership. Well, here at Mark Dolan Tonight, we have obtained a leaked copy of that list and it goes as follows. No parties. No parties, no parties, no parties. Get rid of that disloyal Rishi Sunak and go on then, maybe one party. Sorry, work event. Meanwhile, the Duchess of Cambridge, Kate Middleton, has discovered that she's descended from goat breeders. That's right, she has descended from goat breeders. Well, that's nothing new. Half the royal family are descended from donkeys. Yesterday, we brought you the sad news that the long-running Australian TV soap Neighbours is to end. That's right, Neighbours is to end. Bad news for all of the actors, including the legendary Labrador Bouncer. That's right, Bouncer is looking for work. We can exclusively report on the show that he's auditioning for new film roles as we speak, including Mission Impossible. Absolute classic. Tom Cruise, eat your heart out. Pup Fiction. Fast and Furious. Start your engines. The Hound of Music. Rough, rough, rough. And last but not least, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Bone. Pure magic. And before we go, one last look at poor old Molly May and that beard. Here's the before photo. What a lovely face. Such a lovely girl. Lovely eyes, good solid nose, kind eyes. And here she is after. Intergalactic. And those are your alternative news headlines. More of those next Friday at 10:03. It's time now for Mark Meets. This is the flagship segment of the show in which I interview a high-profile name or celebrity. Well, tonight I speak to a man who is at the very peak of his boxing career, starting out following his old man's footsteps. He was, back in the day, known as Chris Eubank's son. Now, Chris Eubank Sr. is Chris's dad. He's already a two-time IBO world champion and is about to embark on another world title bid in the coming year, following his impressive victory over Welshman Liam Williams last month, which, of course, was viewed by more than 1 million people, a Sky Sports record. This is a guy who has beaten various world champions and challengers, including the likes of Olympic gold medalist James DeGale, Gary O'Sullivan and Arthur Abraham. He's also shared the ring with George Groves and Billy Joe Saunders. Headlining a pay-per-view fight night 5 times. This guy is the definition of box office. I'm delighted to say that Chris Eubank Jr. joins me now, live from Las Vegas. Hi, Chris.
Good morning. No, good afternoon, actually. Yes, just woken up late night last night. How you doing?
Very well. What a privilege to have you on the show. Do you know how old you were when you first put on a set of boxing gloves?
Wow. I would have been, well, the first time my father actually allowed me to get into a boxing gym, I was about 14 years old. So I actually started quite late. Kids now these days, they're starting at 8, 9, 10 years old. So, yeah, I was about 14.
Were you a particularly sporty kid, Chris?
Absolutely. That's what kind of drew me into boxing. I was always very competitive. I played every sport in school: cricket, football, rugby. I was a track star, swimming, and boxing just became that obsession of mine, that the ultimate form of competition. So yeah, and I still play a lot of sports to this day.
Yeah, I only want to spend about 10 seconds talking about your old man, because you're the one that's now achieving all of this sporting glory. But your dad, Chris Eubank, of course, for viewers watching, will be reminded, a 2-weight world champion, one of the most important names in British boxing history. So did he encourage you or discourage you from getting in the ring?
Believe it or not, he actually banned me from going to a boxing gym for a couple of years. He didn't think I would be tough enough. I guess going to a private school and living in a big house isn't what makes a good fighter typically. You know, if you look back at the past champions, they all come from, you know, poverty and a rough upbringing. I didn't have that. So he didn't think I'd be able to be, you know, anything special in the sport. But after a couple of years of just hounding him, begging him to let me in the gym, he finally let me go in at 14. A little bit of help from Lennox Lewis sitting him down and explaining that he had to let me find my own way. And, you know, I guess the rest is history.
As a kid, you're bound to have watched your dad's fights on TV. What thoughts were going through your mind when you watched your dad in action? Did a part of you think, I'd like to have a go at that?
Yeah, it was awesome. He kind of kept me away from it for a long time, and I was never allowed to go to his fights. I never actually watched any of his fights. But once I was old enough to understand what he did, and started looking into the things he was doing, it just became like an obsession, especially with him saying I couldn't do it. And it's like, what is this forbidden thing that he doesn't want me to do? But yeah, it was awesome watching him have those epic fights, and I always wanted to replicate that in my own career.
And let's talk about your boxing story. What is it about putting on a pair of boxing gloves that motivates you? From the age of 14, that's when you first got in the ring. What does it do for you, Chris?
It's just so pure. There's no cheating in the sport of boxing. There's no days off. You can't let your teammates pick up the slack if you're having a bad day. It's all on you at all times. And to me, that is the purest form of competition. Pitting yourself against another man to see who is the strongest, the fastest, the smartest, the toughest, the one with the most heart. And once I stepped into that ring for the first time, it just became everything to me. And I dropped all the other sports I was playing in school, which I've been playing since I was 8 years old. I wasn't interested in them anymore. All I wanted to do was fight.
Has fear ever been a factor in your game?
Listen, anyone who says they're not scared at some point in their careers is lying to you. Fear always is a factor and a part of boxing, but as you fight more, as you get more experience, as you grow older, that fear it lessens. Yeah, my first fight, walking into that ring, my heart was pounding. I was anxious, I was nervous. Now, after 34 fights, 32 wins, when I walk into the ring, I'm enjoying it. I'm soaking in the energy. I'm having fun, So I don't think fear is a factor anymore for me. But obviously, during my career, there are definitely times when fear is definitely a factor.
You clearly have, Chris, great genes, fantastic genetics, an unbelievable work ethic. You train hard, you spar hard, great diet. You're currently training in Las Vegas, and I don't imagine you were on the crap tables or in the casino last night. What about the psychology? Have you had any help with that winning mentality?
Psychology is a huge part of boxing. People that aren't in the fight game or have never fought, a lot of people think that it's all about being tough and strong and mean and angry and hating the other guy you're fighting, but it's actually not that at all. It's a very mental game. You have to be very mentally tough. There's a lot of guys that maybe aren't the most athletic or the most fast or the most strong, but their will to win enables them to beat down and win fights against guys who may be athletically more gifted than them. It takes a lot to be able to go in there and perform in front of thousands or millions of people. It's a lot of pressure. And some guys just don't have that. So having that mental strength and stability and belief is a huge part of boxing. And
how do you do that? How do you do that, Chris? Do you work on positive thinking? What are the tricks of the trade without helping your opponents, of course?
No, that's the thing. I don't think it can be trained. You either have it or you don't. You're either about that life or you're not. It's not one of those things where you can kind of build it up. You're either born with it or you're not. That's my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, but for me, that's how I've seen it over the years.
Now, you are training in Vegas. What is a day in the life of Chris Eubank Jr. when you're in camp?
Well, I'm not in camp right now. Obviously, I fought a month ago, so I've taken a little bit of time off, let my hand heal up a little bit. But, if I am training for a fight, fight camp is very intense. You have 8 to 10 weeks of intense training, a lot of sparring, weight cut, diet. no going out, no partying, no drinking. Not that I drink anyway, but a lot of fighters have to cut a lot of things out when they're in training camp. A lot of guys move away from their families because they don't want to be distracted. So yeah, you know, I run, I do my cardio, I do my sparring, and I go home and I eat and I rest and I prepare for the next day. It's nothing exciting. It's not glamorous. You know, people always see the glitz and the glamour of boxing and the winning and the fighting, but it's a very hard and long journey to get to that point. Training camps they're not fun. They are tough. They are grueling, but it's a part of the sport.
So if you're not a big drinker, but when you're not in camp, how do you let your hair down?
No, the last time I drank, I was 16 years old. I don't smoke. I don't do any of that stuff. I'm out here in Las Vegas now. I have my fun. You know, I'll go to a club. I'll play a little bit of poker. I'll hang out with friends. You know, restaurants. You know, traveling a lot. You know, I let my hair down, but I don't cross the line, and I don't blow up in weight either. A lot of guys, when they're outside of a fight camp, they get huge, and then they have to cut it all off. You know, to make the weight, and that takes a strain on your body. You know, I always stay within 10 pounds of my fight weight, which is why I think I'll be able to have longevity in the sport and be able to perform at a high level until at least the age of 36, 37. It's all about balance.
And your dad had a long career and he looked after himself as well. I've got to say, not only are you an incredible athlete and clearly a ball winner, very stylish guy as well. We saw pictures of you there wearing some very, very smart clothes. How have you struck that balance between celebrity and your profession as a boxer?
You know, I never got into the sport, regardless what many people may think, to become famous. Being a quote-unquote celebrity is not, that wasn't my goal. You know, if that's what's happened over the course of my career, then that's great. But, you know, if you're going into the sport of boxing to you know, for money or for fame or for anything other than you just want to become a great fighter and for the love of the sport, then you never make it. Because it's too hard. There's too much sacrifice. There's too many points in your life where you're going to go through things, you know, the pain and the suffering. That's just, you're just like, you know what, I'm going to find something else. I'm going to find a different path. I love the sport. So I don't let the celebrity and the social media and all that, you know, get to my head. I'm very level-headed. I'm a very down-to-earth type of guy. And that's what you need to be in boxing.
That's very clear to everyone watching. You've been linked, Chris, with fights with Kell Brook and Billy Joe Saunders next. If you take away the politics and it was your decision, who would you fight?
Yes, those are two very big fights that are in the pipeline. If I had to pick one name at this stage of my career, it would be Triple G, Gennady Golovkin. That's a fight we are trying to make. I was supposed to fight him a few years back, and Kell Brook came in at the last minute and took that fight from me, which is why we have never, you know, we've never been cool. We have a beef which really needs to be settled. But Triple G is the number one name that I would love to fight next, and we are working on making that fight.
Well, look, we are salivating at the prospect of that fight. We asked our viewers at home, Chris, who they think should be your next opponent. 31% said Kell Brook, 37% said Conor Benn, and 31% said Billy Joe Saunders. That's the voice of the people. Look, whoever you fight, do you feel like you've got your best boxing ahead of you? Is the best yet to come?
I really do. Even at the age of 32, I'm still improving. I have a new coach now, Roy Jones Jr. You know, for the majority of my career, I never had a coach. So to have a man like that now behind me, in my corner, with me day in, day out, it's a huge thing. And I'm learning a lot. I didn't think I would be able to learn more than I already knew before I met Roy, because I've been doing it so long. But I'm improving, and there is still much more to come. And the great thing about my career where it's at now is that there's so many options, there's so many big names and fights that the fans want to see. So all we have to do now is get those fights made, and my promoters are on that heavily. So the next 12 months, the next 24 months are going to be huge for me.
You've inherited your old man's good looks, his abs and his guns, and his fast twitch muscle fibre. How much has he influenced you, though, as a boxer?
Hugely. My old man has been, he's been an advisor. He's been, a coach, a mentor, for my whole life. But especially through my boxing career, I've learned so much from him. The things he was able to achieve in his career, obviously, have always been something that I've kind of admired, looked up to, and tried to replicate. And you can't buy the knowledge that he has. So to have that with you every day is it's a blessing, and I've used it to my advantage as much as possible.
Is it hard for him to watch his little boy in the ring?
Well, I'm most definitely not a little boy anymore. Maybe when I was just started out at 14 years old, but I'm a 32-year-old veteran in the game now. So yeah, that's definitely not how it is. He's behind me. He's very
don't you think that no matter how successful you get and how ripped you get, you're still his kid, aren't you? You're still his young lad. I mean, does it not worry him sometimes? Does he ever ask you to maybe retire? Is there a conflict between the boxer Chris Eubank Sr. and the dad?
There's definitely a conflict. My father finds it hard to separate being a dad from being, a business partner and a mentor in the boxing game. But I get it. It's just one of those things. But he's fully behind me. He's seen me go through the ups and downs of the sport. He's been there at the highest the highs and the lowest the lows. We've traveled this path together, and we will continue to do that. He's got my back, and we're a great team.
Well, look, you've got so many great fights left in you. We all wish you well. Endless emails coming in. I'd never get through all of them, just saying what huge fans they are of you and of your amazing sporting success. So, we're backing you all the way in your future fights. You've had a really, really tough year in another way, of course, Chris, you and the family, an awful 8 months. You lost Sebastian. Can you just tell me how you're coping with that and how the family are?
Yeah. My brother passed away, and that was tough. That was really tough. It was something that I obviously had to deal with during getting ready for fights, and it's something I've never really had to deal with something like that in my entire life. So it's tough, and it's still tough. But the love I have for him, I know what he wanted me to do. I know he'd be, behind me and wanting me to push forward and keep doing what I'm doing in the sport and to reach the goals that I set out for myself. So, we've all stuck together as a family, and we know he's with us each step of the way and watching over us. So, yeah.
A tragic accident, and we just extend our sympathies, Chris, to you and the family. Absolutely devastating stuff, and he was clearly a remarkable young man. Look, we could talk to you for hours. So many questions coming in on email. When you retire, which I'm hoping is in years and years and years' time, probably you'll be 50 when you finally put down your boxing gloves. Will you do a bit of reality TV?
I've been asked to do reality TV many times. I actually have done some already. You
did Gogglebox, didn't you?
Gogglebox, yeah, that was
brilliant.
Fun. That was a cool experience. Would I go into a jungle and eat insects? Would I go on, would I go ice skating or whatever else these guys are doing? I don't know. I don't think so. But who knows what my mindset is going to be years after I retire, and I want to do something to keep myself occupied. I don't know. But for right now, being on reality TV isn't on my list of things to do. Saying that, I probably will do the Google Box again at some point, because that's chilled. You're on the couch, you're with your old man, you're watching TV and having fun. That's something, that's more of the type of thing that I would be looking at right now.
Well, when you're back in London town, we'd love to have you in the studio because so many people have enjoyed this interview, Chris. Final question before I let you get to your 8-egg omelette and your turkey breast and all the rest of it, your sausages, your protein shakes. We've established you're a very stylish young man, quite the clothes horse. What about your dad's clothes? Have you borrowed any of his +4s or any other outfits?
My old man is he is an icon in the fashion world. Won, Best Dressed Man awards, and I've never even seen him in a robe. Even if he's walking around at home in the morning, at night time, he's in some type of suit or shirt. I don't know how he does it, but he's extremely dedicated. We have a different style. I'm more on the casual, high fashion end. He's more suited and booted. But one thing I did learn from him is that you have to be presentable at all times. You can't go out and look scruffy. You always got to have a swagger. You've always got to look good or look the part, because we're entertainers. This is what we do. So I try to look as good as I can at all times.
Chris Eubank Jr., it's been the greatest privilege to have you on the show. You've got millions of fans here in the UK, and we will be rooting for you in your next fight. And I hope that hand quickly recovers and that you enjoy a bit of downtime in sunny Las Vegas. The amazing Chris Eubank Jr. there, 2-time IBO world champion. Fantastic stuff. Lots more to come in the news agenda. Are you ready to go cruising again? Plus, why do we waste so much food? We've got another Great British Game Show as well, and your emails. See you after this.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis, and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that had been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here.
Joe Biden walking out.
Thank you very much for joining us. Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
Join me
Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question.
Don't miss it. Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
We've had a big reaction to my alternative news headlines. Thanks for the positive comments. George has pointed out, hey, Mark, loving the show. Bouncer was last in Neighbours in 1993. Hashtag just saying. Absolutely, George. But we are determined on this show to keep the memory of Bouncer going. And next Friday, we'll have more movies and TV shows that he's auditioning for. He never dies in our memory, does old Bouncer. Blimey, was it 1993? That makes me feel very old. I'm 47. How old is that in dog years? How about this on Chris Eubank? Declan says, I love his dad and he is a very charming chap too. A great guest again. Couldn't agree with you more. How about this in regard to lockdowns and whether a lot of it came from the Chinese Communist Party, almost a conspiracy to get everyone else to lock down. Camille says, hi, Mark. After watching your show, I do believe we were had by the Chinese. Lordy, thank God we are now out of all this nonsense. Peter says, Sage modelling had no scientific truth whatsoever, and we have given them knighthoods. Western governments enjoyed the totalitarian measures too much. It has corrupted them like a drug. OK, well, look, lots more to come on that. But let's react to the big stories of the day with my amazing panel. We have Sophie Corcoran with us, Lembit Opik and Leo Kearse. Chips are the most thrown away takeaway food, with over half of people saying portion sizes are too big. This, according to a new study, 72% of people surveyed by Just Eat said they always had chips left over from a meal. The Sustainable Restaurant Association found that almost 2 billion quid's worth of takeaway food is thrown away every year in the UK. Sophie, why do we waste food so much?
You know, to be fair, I have a real problem with this poll because it's from Just Eat. Now, the reason why people are going to leave their chips if it's from Just Eat is because they're 9 times out of 10 going to be absolutely minging because they've been in the bag for, like, you know, half an hour.
It's very true.
It's true, though.
Chips have got to be hot, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to be cold, damp and soggy. So, to be fair, I would leave them. So that's my problem with that poll. But I just don't care about food waste, to be honest. It's a very controversial statement. I do not care.
But we have people starving in the world, don't we? People starving, we throw it away. Doesn't seem right, does it?
Well,
and it's a waste of money.
Yeah, true. But I just don't care that much, to be fair. But there are restaurants and stuff that do good things. So while I was at KFC, I worked there in a few stores, and all of them, we actually donate the food that we have left over. So they go to the one I had when I worked in the KFC in Thurrock. Obviously, I worked in one in Newcastle as well. I know that went to like a women's domestic violence shelter, and they used all of the chicken to make curries and stuff. And there's also new things like, you know, there's Too Good To Go app that's come. Me and my family use it all the time where it gets late. And they sell off the old food for £3, really cheap, and it's random stuff. So you get
and I think Pret a Manger do that.
Banging.
Yeah.
Krispy Kremes. Greggs is another good one. Love a Greggs.
There you go. Now you're talking. Leo, do you think food waste is a concern?
I think it will become a concern as inflation spikes and we stop getting our wheat from Ukraine and Russia.
We're all going to be gluten-free for about 10 years, aren't we?
We're going to be huddled under the stairs with a can of baked beans.
You know what? No wheat from Ukraine. This is great news for the celiacs.
Yes, that's very true.
I've never been to Celia, but I'm sure it's a lovely country.
Nicely done.
I mean, the thing that worries me about this, they've brought out this poll, this research, and they say that food portion sizes are too big. So this is clearly going to drive portion sizes down, which is terrible news for tall people. This is, I mean, me, you, Lembit, we're large people. We need a lot of calories in food. I can batter through. I never leave any chips on the side of my plate. This is really going to hurt the tall people.
Who comes up with this rubbish?
Well, yeah, I mean,
Sarah thinks I'm going to research this.
Well, Just Eat, I think, sponsored it, but Sustainable Restaurant Association were actually behind the survey. And I think it is a concern because I think there'll be people watching this show, older viewers of mine, who remember rationing or be quite offended by the idea of throwing food away.
My grandparents were like that.
and whether you liked it or not, you had to finish your food because they did remember rationing. They remembered starving in World War II. So I grew up with that. A couple of thoughts here, though. One is old chips don't heat up too well. There are bits of advice on it. It was my birthday on Wednesday. Thanks for none of the cards.
Happy birthday! We'll have to find a cake. Actually, we throw it away.
We did that for my birthday, didn't we?
It's past the sell-by date. But
you haven't.
Two things. Oh, you're such a smooth talker. Two things. You're just trying to put right what Leo did wrong earlier on. But the two things about it. Number one is I was in an M restaurant in the city, and they wouldn't let me take the chips. I said, why not? I said, there'll be no good cold. They refused to give me the chips. And the second, and fair enough, because it probably would have been, I took everything else. The veg was great the next day. Maybe the chips wouldn't be. Second thing really annoys me. I had an argument about this morning. Best before dates. People think best before means throw away after. Correct. It doesn't mean that. It just means it's not going to be as good. But people slavishly like, it's the 6th of March, it's the 5th of March, so we'll throw away the yoghurt. That's where the unforgivable waste happens.
And I think it's a marketing device because it's a way of making sure there's a turnover of products.
I think they're covering the backside so that people don't get sick and sue them. Whatever the reason, best before should be just scrapped. Yeah. We're losing loads of tonnage on that.
Yeah, you probably only need it on something like salmon or shellfish or pork that does go bad.
KFC though, because like the product would only have like an hour, lifetime, and as soon as it was gone, we just throw it all away, right? When we were in during the day, because we couldn't donate it during the day. But it was still good. Loads. We'd sometimes throw away like 100 bits of chicken at once. That's quite a lot.
Hundreds of bits of chicken at once?
Yeah, if we were busy and, all of a sudden it goes dead. But,
and what did the Colonel think about that? Did he ever come in and tell you off?
He's probably fuming, but...
Excuse me, young lady.
You know the one...
You're throwing away a lot of our chicken.
I can't...
That was my Colonel impression,
I'm a uni student, and I tell you something now, I cannot do leftovers. Why would you want to heat up, old pizza? I don't... Some students in my flat, they eat old food.
Oh, my God.
It's a disaster.
Don't you know how to make a curry?
I think...
I've been eating the same pizza for 22 years.
That's older than me.
I've got a solution to this, especially if you're cooking at home, which is just use good, real ingredients. Because I've got a theory, right? I call it the food test. And if you cook good food, it tastes great at any temperature. So, for example, roast potatoes, if they're done well, they're delicious cold from the fridge.
No, eating cold potatoes
roasties,
now.
Dip them in mayonnaise. Happy days, right?
I do have a confession, though. I tried to reuse something. I was up at my late mum's house and we were just clearing it out and there was some peanut butter and I had it and I was quite ill for 2 days.
Yeah.
Because it was 7 years out of date.
Oh dear.
Oh my God.
Not good.
I learned about peanut butter from that.
And you spent the day on the loo.
Do you want to see a picture?
No.
Preferably not. Like to keep my viewers if that's possible. Let's crack on because a cruise ship 5 times the size of the Titanic has set sail on her maiden voyage from Florida to the Caribbean. The wonder of the seas, as it's called, has been described by people on social media as a city on the water, 362 metres long. It's a Royal Caribbean liner. It carries just shy of 7,000 passengers, 2,500 crew. 18 decks. It cost £1 billion to make. It's also got enough beer on board to fill each of the swimming pools twice over. I could swim in that. I'll tell you. Now, you've worked on the cruise ships.
As have you.
I have. I was a cruise ship entertainer, and I loved it. The only problem you have as a cruise ship entertainer is that if you've had a bad gig, you've got to spend a week with those people, and it can be rather embarrassing.
There's nowhere to hide.
Yeah,
I was one of the celebrity speakers.
Look at this.
The tension. Oh, yeah. So watch and learn, Sophie. And
you'll be next.
Basically, I have no doubt of that, actually. And so I do my speech, but it was like I was so worried in case people didn't like it, because you can run, but you can't hide, and you have to come out of your cabin sometimes.
Yeah, but imagine the poor people stuck on the ship with Mark as the comedian. I mean, we can do jump off side.
Well, they wanted their money back.
Imagine?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, we started with 4,000 passengers. We had about 2,000 by the time we got back to Southampton.
But this is the thing. When you're on a cruise, you're stuck on it. You can't get off.
Oh, no, but it's wonderful. It's a love-hate thing. It's a Marmite situation. I love cruises. I was in Cunard, at Pinot and some other ones. I just loved it. And I'd go back like a shot.
Yeah, I mean, it's the food and drink. I mean, you have breakfast, and the second you finish breakfast, you're thinking about lunch, and then you have dinner, and you get off the boat and you go into like an Italian village or something.
Oh, you can actually get off the boats. I don't know. I've never been on a cruise.
So you've not cruised?
They've got doors.
I've never been on a cruise.
Unless it's COVID and they keep you on board and don't let you off.
Do you remember that? They were on...
That's what we need with this new cruise liner. We need a new COVID to come through. I remember when COVID first came out, it went through the cruise liners like hellfire.
Brilliant.
We need it crossed with Ebola to go through this one. Going on cruises, it looks like hell on toast. It's like you're in an apartment block.
But you haven't
You're in
been
some
on one,
high
have you?
rise.
You've never done
Aren't they like really like...
No,
Have you not performed on a cruise ship?
I've never. I actually had an audition, and they said you seem like a sort of comedy club act who's trying to be a cruise act. Because all I did was tried not to swear.
Oh yeah.
So yeah.
Bit difficult. Very short set. 30 seconds. Yeah, I did loads of jokes about Somali pirates. I just thought, you know what I mean? If people are nervous about something, make jokes.
Those were the days.
But you know, I was on the Harmony of the Seas, which before this ship launched was the biggest passenger ship in the world, and I think it had 4,500 passengers, about 2,000 crew. So you pretty much got a member of staff, you know, for every passenger or two. And it is very opulent. I do wonder, though, in these straitened times, Leo, whether there's something quite immoral about cruises. Given the fact we've talked about food waste, you know, it's opulent. You've got different bars, different restaurants. There's no way that they don't throw away loads of stuff.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you're taking the stuff onto the ship, so it's not like you can redistribute it to homeless people if you don't eat it. And it's not just the food. You've got all the fuel that's being pumped out, all the fumes being pumped out, the oil that's going into the water. Also, what people don't realise is those cruise ships have ballast tanks that carry, so you scoop up the water in one part of the ocean, carry it to another part of the ocean, dump it somewhere with a completely different ecosystem. So you're dumping all these parasites onto coral reefs. I think cruise ships are. Are you sponsored by Cunard as well as North Korea, Iran?
No, he's actually he's booked to do a speaking tour on Vladimir Putin's yacht.
No reason
after the war.
No reason for refuse.
Why do we care though? Why do we actually care? Well, don't waste things. Let's just live how we want to live. Why do we care?
But is it not immoral to throw food away?
I don't care if it's moral or immoral. I want to live how I want to live. I'm sick of this moral,
This generation.
You know what I mean? No, I'm sick of all the moral
I think I know what you mean. I think what it is, and I hear what you're saying. I think the pandemic has done this to you, which is you're just sick of being told what to do from on high. And I've got that now. I go around on a little moped, and I sometimes just I park on a single yellow line. I'm not supposed to be there. I don't care anymore. I've had 2 years of being bullied by the state.
Oh my God!
That's my act of rebellion, by the way.
Mad Max over here. The Mad Max of Islington.
Stick him against Putin.
I wouldn't park on a double yellow because that would be a hazard.
He's done.
Yeah, good recovery
Putin's like terrified of you.
Of course he is.
He's actually done.
And they might send me to
I mean, I just don't want to be told what to do anymore. I'm sick of these people telling us how to live our lives and all of this moral nonsense. Just get lost. Leave me alone.
And also, cruise ships, you pay for it yourself. It's not charity. It's not a benefit system. You spend X grand to go around the world. I think you're completely right.
I think it's jealousy because, people can't afford to go on cruises and people being me, but you know what I mean?
Brilliant stuff. Greg, have we got time to talk about sex after this? Brilliant stuff. There you go. If that doesn't keep you tuned in, nothing will. That's right, we will talk about sex. How much is too much? I'm probably the wrong person to ask. Season 2.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Mark's big opinion. Well, let's have a look at this. David says, absolutely spot on, Mark. I believe that Vladimir Putin is an evil man. He has invaded Ukraine. What's playing out on our TV screens is an absolute humanitarian nightmare. But I believe that the West has brought this on itself. Is that your view? Take a look at my big opinion monologue, which is now on Twitter at GBNews, if you missed it earlier in the show. Also on cruising. Jeff says, hi, Mark, why would anyone go on a cruise? 7,000 people all flooding to any local attraction. An absolute nonsense. Disgraceful. It needs to be banned. Thank goodness it's crap. There you go. Not pulling his punches is our Jeff. And Trevor says, dear Mark, American tourists on cruise ships, no food waste. Very good point. I love your emails. Keep them coming. We've got a couple of minutes to go and we'll play our game show shortly. But it's time now to sink our teeth into the final story of the evening with Lembit Opik, Sophie Corcoran and Leo Kearse. It's been revealed why former Tottenham midfielder Kevin Prince Boateng was so injury-prone during his time playing for England. All has been revealed by his ex-wife Melissa Satter, who says it was down to having sex 10 times a week. Well, I'm not sure I can relate. I might plead the Fifth Amendment on this one. I was never injured. But panel, what do we think? Leo, how much sex is too much?
I don't think there is too much sex, unless it's really, affecting your ability to drive the bus. This is fine. What I found interesting about this is these comments were made in 2012. This isn't news. This is literally a decade old. So this is just a newspaper finding an excuse to post some Instagram pictures of a woman in a bikini, as opposed to doing some actual investigative journalism.
And a late night TV show seizing the opportunity to talk about sex, because it is a great talking point.
But we're not showing the pictures. Why are we not showing the pictures, Mark? That's what I want to see.
That's what we definitely need to do. I mean, you do have to wonder, don't you, Lembit, about what the right number of times a week would be?
Yeah, I don't understand how you can get by with only 10 times a day. Or was it a week? Well, move on to Sophie.
You could look. I mean, you. By the way, you've had a very rich private life.
You shouldn't have been watching.
No, I know. I've got the videos.
Well, I would say that they say, oh, really? Okay, how much do you want? After the water.
I won't part with them.
Have you got a clip? Memories. The fact is, I know I've got a bit of a reputation. All I would say is, fair play to him. If it's true, he's a happy man. And if it's not true, we've all got our own level. Maybe for some people it's more than others, Mark. But the fact of the matter is, this is, as you say, an uncorroborated story. And fair play to him. But I don't understand the injury point.
You know
How did he get injured?
I think an overactive groin.
What? Yeah. He had a groin strain.
Thigh injuries, I believe. I'll spare you the gory details.
Maybe he was getting pegged. That is one.
My mum watches.
Now, what does being?
Not anymore. She doesn't.
What does being pegged mean?
It's when you go camping and you've got to fix the fly sheet, so you hammer it into the soft ground.
I'll take your word for it. That's what it means. Sophie, do you think that those movies in which couples make love all night long are actually rather unhelpful because it's unrealistic, isn't it?
Well, yes, but I'm a football player, and to be fair to him, to play football, you do need some endurance, and having sex 10 times a week is some endurance.
It's going to deplete you.
He's playing men's football, not women's. So, just saying.
Now, that was very, very harsh. I think you'll find women's football is very, very competitive. And you're going to get unstuck now for that comment on social media, let me tell you. But do you think, Leo, that expectations around how much sex we're supposed to be having is a problem? Because, you know, if you're a couple and you just get your rocks off once a fortnight, what's the problem if you're both having a good time?
Yes, sometimes life gets in the way. You know, sometimes we have to work late.
Sometimes the wife gets in the way.
Yeah.
Or your kids. Or your kids.
That's true. Yeah. Toddlers, that's the ultimate...
anti-aphrodisiac.
That's what I was going to say.
A better word for it. You know?
Yeah. Contraceptive.
Yeah. That's not quite the right word. Bromide. I was thinking that's the ultimate bromide. I used to give bromide to soldiers to put them
We
on
might put
the
some of that in Lembit's tea.
Thanks very much indeed. I'm here all week.
It's time now. Well, it's time now to play the Great British Game Show, on that sexual note. We're going tonight to play the Great British Name Show. On this day in 1964, legendary boxer Cassius Clay changed his name and became the even more legendary Muhammad Ali. But of course, he's not the only famous person to have changed their name. Therefore, let's see if you at home and my panel here in the studio can identify the famous person after hearing their birth name. So let's play the Great British Name Show. And here is your first celebrity, Reginald Kenneth Dwight.
Reginald?
Go for it.
Is it Elton John?
It is Reg Dwight.
Saw it in the auto cue.
Oh, that would do it.
Yeah.
That's how you win. Did you not recognise Reg Dwight?
Yeah. I heard it now that you cheated. I remember it was actually in the film Rocket Man. That's why I remember.
Let's keep Leo's eyes off the prompter for the next one. Alexander de Pfeffel.
Oh, Boris Johnson.
It is. It's BJ himself. Alexander Boris de Pfeffel Johnson.
You did not know that. Did you not know that? Are you joking? Wow.
Yes.
Why?
And I was ticked off by the brilliant journalist Peter Hitchens for calling him Boris when he was on this show. He said, "Don't call him Boris. His real name is Alexander, and Boris is his stage name."
There's no real Boris in there at all.
Why is he got on his passport? Almost like he's acting.
I reckon he should probably change it back to Alexander now where, you know, Russia's happening, you know.
Oh, yeah, that's it.
More appropriate.
Get the Kremlin on board. Like,
I'll have a word.
Like right, let's have a look at our next celebrity. Who is Ilyena Lydia Mironov? She's won an Oscar.
Oh, it's going to be...
She's probably in her early 70s
American
now.
actress.
British actress, very glamorous.
Zsa Zsa Gabor.
No. She was teased by Michael Parkinson for her cleavage.
I don't know who any of these people are.
Michael Parkinson was obsessed with her boobs.
Sophia Loren.
Helen Mirren.
Oh.
Oh.
Ilyena Lydia Mironov. Mironov. There you go. There's the connection. How about our next celebrity, Joaquin Raphael Bottom?
Where are they getting these names from?
We struck a bum note there.
Our bottom,
so to speak.
I can tell you that he is called Joaquin, but what is his new surname? Joaquin
Phoenix
is the right answer.
What?
Oh,
okay, how about Harry Webb? He might sing at Wimbledon if you're not careful.
Ed Sheeran?
No.
Hang on.
He's romantically linked to
Cliff Richard.
Sue Barker. I was going to say Sue Cook. Another friend of mine.
Oh,
Sue Barker.
Becca?
Cliff Richard. It's Cliff Richard. How about
so good at this.
Elizabeth Alexandra Mary? Windsor?
Oh, the Queen.
Queen Elizabeth.
No way.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm failing the UK.
Stefani Joanne Angelica Germanotta. She likes wearing unusual clothes made
Lady
of meat.
Gaga?
It's Gaga.
Yeah, I mean.
Maurice Micklewhite, an amazing actor, probably in his 80s now.
If they're all like above 60.
My name is Maurice
Caine.
Micklewhite. It's Michael Caine. Absolutely right. How about Peter Jean Hernandez, now famous pop star, a young pop star. You might know who this is.
Bruno Mars.
Bruno Mars is the right one.
Where are you
well done.
From?
Brilliant stuff. My thanks to my amazing panel tonight for big entertainment and big debates. Also for your company. I'm back in for Dan tomorrow at 9. Headliners is next.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking like another dry day and a fine day actually, with plenty of sunshine for many areas. Let's take a look at the detail. First thing, in the southwest, it's going to be largely cloudy, but through the day there will be sunny spells across the region, remaining dry but still a little chilly. Moving further east towards London, another dry start, but chilly here too. Staying dry throughout the day, with sunny or bright spells for many. Moving to South Wales, and it's going to be a bright but chilly start, with a frost for many, feeling warmer though by the afternoon in the sunshine. Towards the northwest of England, a bright but frosty start, especially across coastlines, staying dry throughout the day with sunny spells for all across the region. Further east, it's going to be dry and chilly, and a frost across the area. Long sunny spells throughout the day, but still feeling cold in the afternoon. Now over to Scotland, where it's a very similar story. Sunshine throughout the morning for the area, no rain, but frosty first thing. Northern Ireland seeing a morning of sunshine after a chilly and calm start as well to the new working week, turning breezier throughout the rest of the day, but at least remaining dry. And those are all the details. Plenty of long-lived sunshine and dry weather across the UK to be had. And that's how the weather's shaping up during tomorrow morning.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite